Hello everyone, this is Cimmerian, and in this video we're going to do a overview of one of my recent toy boxes that I submitted called the Sliding Puzzle. And of course there's a fair bit of logic in this, so we can't cover every single connection, but I can cover the different circuits I designed, because that's usually how I design in this game, is I build separate circuits one at a time, each doing a certain function, and then I link them all together to get to accomplish the goal I've been trying to do. First off, you'll see there are two identical puzzles here, and the reason for that is because in the intro, the tutorial, I have to show you how to use it, and so this is the block, or this is the puzzle over here that I'm showing you all that on, because I didn't want to mess with that puzzle over there too much, because I could mess with the logic just by flicking all the colors around. So I built this separate one over here simply so I could show you at the beginning how to play the game. Now one thing to note, I'm going to pull out the wand, is I couldn't use a target camera because I wanted a direct overhead view, and the target camera gets a little iffy at times when you're trying to point straight down and you need to control which direction is up on the camera. It gets a little weird. Now the problem with bird's eye camera is I can't point it at a locator. I have to point it at the player. And so what I did on both these puzzles is below the puzzle there is a checkpoint, and I bring the player into the checkpoint, and that trigger area activates that bird's eye camera. So that's how I get the direct overview of the puzzle. And with a bird's eye camera, you can actually force which direction will be the top of the screen by the film here in the camera. Whichever direction that is pointed, that is going to be the top of your screen. So that's how I got that effect working. But over here, of course, is where all the logic is. Now, underneath the puzzle, there are 64 counters. We'll get into what those counters are doing. But on top here is all my logic gates. And there's a couple of them. But I'm just going to break them down to circuits to tell you how it works. Right here you'll see these arrows on the ground, and they are controlling the direction. So when you move in a direction, these logic gates are controlling it. Now I did a little trick here to save myself some logic. I don't monitor exactly what square you're on when I'm moving the square around. Instead, I only focus on what column you're in and what row you're in, so I can control each separately. So that's why the logic right here, there's not as much as you might think there is. There's 3 possible outputs for the up, 3 for the down, 3 for the right, and 3 for the left. Because if you're going up, you can't reach the bottom of the puzzle. If you're going down, you can't reach the top of the puzzle, and so on. So you only need 3 directions, or 3 possible locations for each direction you travel in. Now over here, this is the logic that's controlling, it's interacting with the logic that's controlling the direction. And this logic knows which row you're in by these 3 logic gates right here. And then it also knows what column you're in by the 3 logic gates going across the top right here. Now these 3 logic gates control the logic gates below them. So if the logic gate at the top is open, it opens all of them. And if it's closed, it closes all of them. So when you first hit a direction, what it does is it activates this little mini time layer here, which waits a few cycles while the game is setting up these logic gates into the proper open or close states. And then this sends a signal out, which travels down these 3 logic gates to the column that you're in, or is it the row? Up and down, is that row or column? It's row. Okay, so the signal goes in and it finds out which row you are currently in, and then it travels across the column for that row to send an output to the square you just moved in. So that's how the controls are working. And of course, I can't go through everything, but if you have any direct questions about anything, feel free to let me know. The system doesn't seem to save a ton of logic in this 4x4 puzzle, but if the puzzle was much bigger, it would save a lot of logic, because you can think of it this way. If I was doing this so that I needed to know what square the player was on, and there's 16 squares here, I could put 16 trigger areas down so I would always know what square they're in. Or I could put 4 down each of the rows and 4 across each of the columns. That way I would have 8 trigger areas instead of 16, and I would still know exactly where the player is. It doesn't sound like it's saving a lot, but if this got much bigger, if let's say it was a 9x9 puzzle, then I could either have 81 separate trigger areas, or I could have 9 that are covering the rows and 9 that are covering the columns. So instead of 81 trigger areas, I would have 18, and I would still know exactly which square the player was on. Alright, so when the signal comes out of one of these logic gates to tell us what row we're in and what column we're in, it then closes the appropriate logic gate right here. Now when any of these close, what it does is it sets that block to yellow, and it turns all the blocks around it back to the black color. And that's done just on when one of the gates closes. I also use this group of gates. That's where the input goes for when the player jumps or selects a block. And the signal will travel through these and come out only at the block that the player is on, and that signal travels over to this group of logic gates. And what this little circuit here is what I call the valid move group of logic gates. They are there to know whether you jumped in a valid square. If you jumped beside the blank spot, then the game will continue. Otherwise, it's just going to send you a message saying this is not a valid move. And these gates are controlled by this group of gates up here. And this group of gates is controlled by this monitors where the blank spot currently is on the puzzle. So only one of these will be closed, and when it closes, it will tell the appropriate gates up here which of them are a valid move. So the blank spot is controlled by the counters below. Each of the counters is set to target count 1, 2, 3, and 4. And there are 64 of them, so there are 4 for each square. And once any of these counters reaches a target count, or a 0, so once it hits 0 reached, it's going to close the appropriate gate up here. And when any gate closes up here, it opens all the gates around it just to make sure we're always good. And when it closes, it also sets up this logic over here so that we now know what is a valid move in the puzzle. So if you make a valid move, this is the logic controlling a valid move, it closes a gate over here. And these gates are set up so that I can subtract from the counters below. And this is how it works. I've got a little time delay up at the top here. What happens when you jump, if you make a valid move, it closes the appropriate gate here. When any gate here closes, it starts up this time delay. And what this time delay does is every cycle, it sends a message into this group here, which will subtract 1 or to a decrement of 1 to all the counters of that associated block. And it also sends a signal over to the blank tracker circuit here, which will be incrementing your blank square by 1 for all 4 of its counters at the same time. And this circuit will keep running until any counter of these 16 reaches a 0 reached, at which point it is now blank, because any of these, went up, should have gone down. Any of these top counters have a 0 reached hit. They not only close that blank circuit logic gate, they also turn these color plates off, and they also turn my time delayer off. So how the counters down here are working is target reach 1 turns a color plate blue, target count 2 turns it orange, 3 turns it green, and 4 turns it purple, and 0 reach turns it off. So I'm actually using those counters to control the colors of these color plates, and any of those ever hit 0 reached, and I know that a new blank spot has been created, and I also know that I have successfully moved the color from one spot to the next, so I can stop my entire circuit. And then this logic over here is controlling the 2 different puzzles. If you're in the easy puzzle, there's only 1 logic gate needed, because I only ever need to look to see if this top left color plate has turned orange. If it turns orange, then you have completed the easy puzzle. The hard puzzle, all of these logic gates have to be closed, and they're all tied to the associated color of one of these color plates. So the first 4 are the blues along the top, the second 4 are the oranges, then the greens, then the purples. If they're all closed and a signal comes out the last logic gate's input blocked, then you have completed the puzzle. So that is really how all the circuits are working together for this game. There are, of course, a lot of logic connections in here for making sure this all works. But I find that if you build to one circuit at a time and then interconnect later, it actually makes it easier to plan out your logic. Like first I built the way to move the yellow square around all these blocks, and then I built a way to make sure that that I knew where the yellow square was. Then I built a way to make sure it was a valid move. Then I built a way to make sure I knew where the blank spot was. And then it just all started to fall into place. So if you build them separately as separate chips on a circuit board almost, that's how you can actually really get some pretty complicated logic working in this game. So like I said before, if you have any questions on specific ways of doing things within this toy box, feel free to ask me here or find me on DisneyInfinityFans.com. And again, this is Cimmerian, and I hope this has been helpful.